he was far from the perfect role model that many documentaries portray, which raises the question, can we truly separate the performer from the man? And can Ric Flair's contributions to wrestling be celebrated without acknowledging the darker truths Bret Hart has now brought to light? And this revelation has shaken many fans who grew up worshipping Flair, because if Bret Hart, the man known for his honesty, integrity, and respect for the craft, feels the need to finally pull the mask off Ric Flair's legacy, then it forces us to re-evaluate just how much of Flair's success was built on genuine greatness versus backstage politics, recycled formulas, and a flashy personality that covered up deeper flaws. And whether you side with Bret or Ric in this debate, one thing is for certain. This story shows us that the legends we idolize are often far more complex than the highlight reels we watch. And now that Bret Hart has finally spoken out so candidly, fans are left questioning whether the nature boy, Ric Flair, was truly the greatest of all time, or simply the best at making us believe he was.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for watching. When it comes to professional wrestling, few rivalries and backstage relationships have stirred up as much curiosity, debate, and behind-the-scenes gossip as the one between Bret, the Hitman, Hart, and the nature boy, Ric Flair. And now, after years of subtle jabs, respectful acknowledgements, and occasional sharp criticisms, Bret Hart has finally opened up in more detail about what many fans didn't know about Ric Flair. And let's just say the truth isn't painting Flair in the most flattering light, because while most wrestling fans have grown up idolizing Flair's larger-than-life persona with his limousine-riding, jet-flying, kiss-stealing swagger, Bret is peeling back the curtain to show a different side of the 16-time world champion, one that often clashed with the more serious, technical, no-nonsense style that Bret Hart lived and breathed. And to truly understand where this tension comes from, you have to look back at the 1980s and early 1990s, when both men were carving out their reputations in very different ways. Flair as the charismatic showman of the NWA and WCW, cutting flamboyant promos that electrified the crowd, while Hart was quietly earning his stripes in WWE as one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time, priding himself on realism, storytelling in the ring, and leaving fans with the belief that his matches were not only entertaining, but legitimate athletic contests. And Bret has now revealed that behind the curtain, Flair's influence in the wrestling business wasn't always the positive, uplifting mentorship that many younger wrestlers claimed it to be. Instead, Bret remembers a man who was often politically motivated, self-serving, and more interested in protecting his own legacy than truly elevating others, even going so far as to describe Flair's in-ring psychology as repetitive, formulaic, and reliant on a handful of spots that worked for the crowd, but didn't showcase the deeper art of professional wrestling that Bret valued so much. And while some might accuse Bret of being overly critical, he insists that his criticisms come not from bitterness, but from a desire for the truth to be recognized. That Ric Flair, for all his charisma, didn't always back it up in the ring the way fans were led to believe, and when Bret compares his own matches, where he carefully mapped out sequences designed to make both himself and his opponent look strong, he claims Flair often fell into lazy patterns, repeating the same spots night after night, regardless of who he was in the ring with, which made his work predictable to other wrestlers, even if the fans didn't immediately catch on. And Bret has gone even further by pointing out that Flair's backstage politics often overshadowed his contributions, with Flair using his influence to bury talent he didn't see as a threat or to keep himself on top longer than perhaps he should have, something Bret personally experienced during his WCW run when he felt Flair was more concerned about preserving his own aura than helping Bret succeed in an environment that was already hostile to ex-WWE stars. And if you think this is just Bret Hart throwing shade, you'd be mistaken, because he has also acknowledged Flair's charisma and undeniable impact on the business. But what he's finally admitting publicly is that Flair's legacy is not as clean, polished, and universally positive as many documentaries and highlight reels make it seem. as Bret reveals that Flair often undermined colleagues, leaned heavily on the nature boy gimmick to mask weaker storytelling, and at times failed to evolve with the business, making him appear dated when compared to wrestlers who embraced innovation. And Bret even recalls moments where Flair would criticize his own matches, dismissing Hart's slower, more methodical storytelling style as boring, when in reality, Bret's matches often stood the test of time far better than the flashy but predictable Ric Flair formula. And perhaps the most damning revelation Bret makes is about Flair's personal character. While fans adored him as the flamboyant, party-loving figure on TV, Bret has hinted that Flair's real-life lifestyle of excess, drinking, and womanizing often bled into his work, creating unprofessional environments that hurt younger wrestlers who looked up to him. And Bret doesn't mince words when he says that while Flair was a legend,